Greetings, I'm Mark Hunter with McPherson.Tech. This is the first in a series of videos for Worship Tech booth staff and volunteers. It's a little bit of a guided tour of the McPherson First United Methodist Church Tech booth and a general guide to some of what we learned. So let's get started. A few years ago, our tech booth was in the balcony. We had very limited light control, no remote clicker, so we had to guess when the pastors wanted the next slides advanced, and mixing sound was very difficult. I was part of the team that moved the tech booth down to the main level. It's still not in the perfect position, but much better. It's slightly raised, has a sound dampening surface in the front, and it isn't up a flight of stairs. It was set for slides and sound, but we've added live stream stations as well. I'll provide some insight into that detail in the video that's part of this series. All of the data and power are run through channels in a column that we can easily access. The one thing I would change if I were doing this again is I would move the entryway to the other end to make wiring along the back wall easier and to isolate our entry just a little bit. The sound booth is divided into several sections. Begin with the section in the center that is for the slides, which we use PowerPoint and ProPresenter. We have a section for the soundboard, and then our final slot is for the live streaming. Now this includes not only the live streaming, but also the camera control and video control. There are sections that we have for lighting, but most of the lighting is set up before the service and not a lot of tweaking is done during it, but we do have some presets that we can change throughout the service very easily. In this series, we're going to be doing an introduction to all of these areas, beginning with the overall introduction that we're doing right now. Next, we're going to have a presentation on slides and the computers that are used for those. Then we're going to talk about the soundboard and a quick introduction to that, live streaming, and finally we're going to end up with camera and video switching. When you first arrive at church, it won't look like this. You're going to have to go through and first of all power everything up. In our system, we go through and behind we have a rack that you begin with. In this rack, there's a switch called audio power. Some churches are a little bit different, but you generally have a rack like this. This is actually a sequencer. We'll turn things on in the proper order. Now the sound and a lot of the lights are actually controlled from the booth, but the main unit that processes them is up front. If you go through the side door here towards the front of the sanctuary, you'll find a rack. And that rack has a lot of the controls for the sound and the overhead lighting. We do have one additional thing in the booth that we're not going to cover in detail here, but there is a Facebook and YouTube monitoring system. This is actually a separate computer. When you boot it up, you can actually go through and bring up the Facebook and the YouTube channels. They're kind of in the history of the browser. This is not required. We can also check on our phones to see if the Facebook or YouTube is working, but this is a simple way that we can make sure that everything is working during the service. At the end of the service, there are a number of steps we have to go through as well. We usually go up and turn off the monitors, and while we're up there, go ahead and blow out some of the candles in the altar just to help out. But the main part is shutting down the sound booth. That's what we're going to cover now. One of the most important things is properly shutting down the soundboard. We're going to go into more details on the soundboard in a later session, but for right now, if you take a look at the soundboard, it'll show you how to go through and shut it down. Up in the corner section is the screen. And in the screen, there's basically kind of what we call the home button. If it doesn't currently show this power down feature, if you go through and press this very top button twice, then it will go through and make sure you return to the home screen with the power down selection. We then press the power down. Once we press power down, we click on the shutdown, and this actually shuts down the computer that runs the soundboard. After it says it is now safe, then we can go through and begin shutting down the power and everything else in the sound booth. Once everything is shut down, then we can go over and in the audio power, we have the switch that we press to off. You do kind of have to push your finger in there just to prevent you from automatically bumping it, but you turn that off and then we're set. And that is our tech booth overview introduction. We'd like to thank you very much for listening to this. And up next, we'll actually have a presentations on slides using our presentations on the computers.